Okay, but if colleagues, if we can see Scott on the screen. Oh, perfect. All right, I think we can start on time. Give me 1 second. All right, we can start. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Joining us from the Occupied Palestinian Territories, Scott Anderson, the Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator for the Occupied Palestinian Territory. Scott, welcome. Please go ahead and make your introduction.
Okay, thank you so much, and thanks for having me here today. I want to start by talking a little bit about the events that took place this past Saturday. On Saturday, I visited Nasser Hospital after a strike in the safe zone of Mawasi, and the hospital itself is in Khan Yunis. I've been in Gaza for 9 months, and I witnessed some of the most horrific scenes I've seen in the 9 months that I've been here. The health facility was overstretched. There were more than 100 people injured. The air was filled with the smell of blood, and one health worker was mopping up pools of blood on the floor using only water because there aren't sufficient supplies of disinfectant material or other cleaning supplies to stop the spread of infection. There's not enough beds, hygiene supplies, sheeting, mattresses, or scrubs, and many patients were treated on the ground or on waiting room benches without disinfectant. And this puts even treatable injuries at risk of sepsis and much more significant complications. Ventilator systems were not working due to electrical problems. And as I walked through the hospital and talked to families and children, we saw toddlers who were double amputees, children paralyzed and unable to receive treatment because they don't have the equipment at the hospital in Khan Yunis, and others who were separated from their parents. And we also saw mothers and fathers searching frantically within the hospital for their children, unsure if they were alive. One mother I talked to told me that she was told to move to Rafah because it would be safe there. And then she was told to move to Mawasi because it would be safe there. And unfortunately for her and her family, that was not true. And I think the words of this mother are a reminder that nowhere is safe in Gaza and no one is safe in Gaza. That family had 3 children impacted by the blast. One child was completely uninjured, miraculously. Another child was paralyzed, and the other son was killed. I mentioned that there's nowhere safe in Gaza, and I think we saw that over the weekend, both with what happened in Mawasi, but also the incident at Beach Camp where 25 other people were killed. And what's urgently needed is a complete ceasefire for all parties to the conflict to protect the civilians wherever they are, but especially in UN schools and hospitals. Since the war began 9 months ago, more than 190 UNRWA facilities have been hit. Most have been hit multiple times. And unfortunately for people in Gaza, displacement continues. In the north last week, there were newly issued evacuation orders asking all civilians in Gaza City to evacuate. There are an estimated 300,000 people in the north. And we estimate the evacuation orders impacted over 200,000 people. At this moment, 9 in 10 people in Gaza are displaced, and almost everyone has been forced to flee over and over. And on average, people in Gaza have had to move at least once a month. And the term displacement sounds very sterile, and I don't think does justice to what people go through when they move. People are often only able to take whatever they can carry, and they're mostly on foot. And some are only able to carry their children, and many have lost everything, and they need everything. And as people displace more and more often, every time they lose a little bit of their wealth, a little bit of their worldly possessions. When I was in Gaza City last Friday talking to people that had displaced, they simply told me they can't afford to move anymore, that they're very much stuck where they are. So our teams are on the ground providing food and water to everyone that is displaced and trying very hard to make sure that they can at least have some of their basic necessities met. One of the things that I think we all find frustrating here is that after 9 months, what people need in the north remains the same as what they needed when the war began. It's very basic: food, water, medicine, hygiene kits. Women especially have urgent needs for hygiene kits and sanitary items, and we've been unable to meet that need over the course of the 9 months, and people just don't have access to their very basic necessities. Over the last week, 5 schools that were shelters, including 3 of them UNRWA shelters, have been hit by strikes. Dozens of people were reportedly killed, many more injured, including women and children. Now, for us to be able to meet the basic necessities of the population that is displaced and treat the injuries that people have sustained, we need to bring aid in at scale in the right quantity and the right quality. But unfortunately, several factors continue to stand in our way that would allow us to bring humanitarian supplies into Gaza at scale. They include restrictions on movement, safety of humanitarian aid workers, not the right supplies coming to Gaza, unpredictable working hours, telecommunication challenges, as well as fuel. And recently, there's been a substantial increase in the breakdown of law and order in Gaza. This started in February when the blue police were told to stay home. And it really came to light and was exacerbated when the conflict in Rafah began, and the police were unable to exert any presence in Rafah. And we've seen a complete breakdown of law and order, and we've seen essentially what are crime families preventing the free movement of aid into Gaza to assist people. A lot of that's due to smuggling. It's not people that are simply hungry and thirsty and looking for aid, but it has had a significant impact on our ability to bring things in at scale. The truck drivers that we use have been regularly threatened or assaulted. Tires were shot out of their trucks on Friday, and they've become less and less willing, understandably, to move assistance from the border crossings to our warehouses and then on to people that are in need. We have had some challenges with people looting, which really isn't a surprise. After 9 months, people are hungry, people are angry, people are desperate. And as I mentioned, there aren't any police to maintain social order. Also, 9 months into the war, we haven't had any international media access. The only media really are people like myself or others talking to you. And something that is desperately needed is media in Gaza. In most war zones, journalists and media workers perform a very vital function by informing the public about what is happening and to highlight the impact of the war has had on innocent civilians. So we would urge the Israeli authorities to allow international journalists to enter the Gaza Strip. And at the same time, every effort must be made to protect the journalists and media workers wherever they are in Gaza. So I'll close by saying civilians must be protected at all times. What we urgently need is a ceasefire, respite for the people of Gaza, the release of hostages so they can return to their families, and a meaningful opportunity for healing to begin. So thank you. I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Scott. And just to confirm, you're briefing us from Gaza, right?
Yes, I'm in Khan Yunis at the UNRWA Japanese Health Center.
Thank you. Okay, let's start. Edie, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Alex, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. You touched at the end on one of the big issues that we've been hearing is preventing aid, and that is the issue of law and order. Are any discussions going on with the Israelis or with basically communities in Gaza to try and get this under control so that aid can be delivered? And can you give us some figures on how much aid is actually getting in? And we hear that very little is getting to the south, some to the north. Thank you.
And thank you for the question, Edith. So to start with aid, I mean, I think you said it well. We're not getting enough in. That's the clear answer, especially for the south. We do have a checkpoint or a crossing point in the north that we asked for a long time, and we're thankful that Israel has provided. So for the north, we're able to get between 25 and 70 trucks in every day. What we don't have in the north is commercial access, and I think that's the other thing that would be needed to ensure we have the right amount of quality and quantity of goods entering into the north. In the south, again, we have a mixture of commercial access as well as aid. The aid trucks, I mean, we've been barely able to hit 100 trucks on a good day over the last week because of law and order problems. And the commercial sector is doing a little bit better, but they pay essentially protection money to the families in the South, and they also have armed guards. We are not, as humanitarians, going to put armed guards on our convoys. Nothing that we're bringing in is worth someone's life to get shot over. So we are doing what you, I guess, mentioned. We're in talks with everybody about trying to get some sort of police force established, a blue police force. But until then, we are working with families to try and arrange, I guess, community level policing, for lack of a better way to say it. The challenge we're facing at the moment is the smuggling trade is quite lucrative. And it's this time it's cigarettes. Next time it'll be something else. But one cigarette's 100 shekels. Very roughly, that's $25. Actually, a little more, but to make the math easy, is $25. That works out to 20,000 shekels for a carton of cigarettes, which is significant money, right? You're talking almost $5,000. But as I said, that's just a symptom. It's not the actual root cause, which is the lack of law and order. So we are working with the families, both those that are in Rafah and preventing aid, but also elsewhere in Gaza to try to provide some sort of community policing. Some are more successful than others, but we will continue those efforts because it is important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Gabriel, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Anderson. My name is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. Thank you very much for the informative briefing. I have a couple questions to start. The UNRWA headquarters was bombed today in Gaza City. Do you have any more information or what? I know that there's no more UNRWA staff there. They had long left the headquarters. But what is your view on, from where you sit, on the future of trying to have UNRWA continue their work after this conflict is over, given that your headquarters is now completely destroyed, as far as I understand? My second question is, when you were at Nasser Medical Complex, you gave in your briefing a very detailed view of the horrific scenes that you saw there. But can you tell me, based on the victims that you saw, how many were women and children, roughly? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Yeah, I saw the video of the UNRWA headquarters, and I can't really say more than that. What I will say is on October 12th, the United Nations was asked by the government of Israel to leave the north and did, and we have not had a presence there since then. So getting information or verifying information is very difficult because of that. I think the important thing to remember in any of these, as long as no human life is lost, structures can be rebuilt. Right? So it may make it a little more difficult for UNRWA or the UN to operate without a building, but it's something that can be overcome and can be replaced, unlike human life. When I walked around Nasser, I mean, I don't want to give any figures because disproportionately I tried to talk to families with children. I did that intentionally because I wanted to hear their stories. I wanted to hear, what had occurred with them. So any numbers I give you would be very skewed because of the preference I made when I went around and talked to people. But as I said, I wanted to hear their stories, what happened to them. But there were over 135 different patients that were admitted to Nasser Hospital on that day. The hospital has 38 emergency room beds. Before the incident, they had 40 patients. So they were very overwhelmed. I did see a lot of everything in terms of patients, women, children, men. But as I said, I focused on the children and the families because that's what was important to me during the visit. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Tony, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for this briefing. Tony Naddaf, Al Hurra TV. The U.S. says the floating pier designed to increase the amount of aid getting into Gaza Strip will soon cease operations, which is less than 2 months after it was installed. I want to hear your take, first of all, regarding the efficiency of this pier since it was installed. You're on the ground. Did you see it was efficient? It was helpful? And if its removal will affect in any way the humanitarian aids in Gaza?
Good. Thank you. I mean, I guess I'd start by saying that any methods of getting aid in, they're additive, is welcome. 2 million people are in Gaza. Everyone is in need. So anything that can help bring more aid in for them, we welcome. I think that the pier has brought in a little over 600 trucks since the operation began. They had some problems with weather in particular. So, I hope that they'll continue to operate. So as I said, we need more crossings into Gaza, not less. We need more aid in Gaza, not less. And as I said, everyone needs everything. So hopefully the pier will continue to operate and continue to bring aid in because it is vitally needed in Gaza.
Thank you, Scott. Any more questions in the room? Deji, please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Anderson. This is Xu Dezhi with China Central Television. Last month, the UN official actually wrote a letter to the Israeli officials saying that to ask Israel to do more to safeguard the security and safety of people, the humanitarian staffers. Is there any update or response from Israel according to your observation from the past 1 month? And you just mentioned about the law and order issue, but that is inside Gaza. So technically speaking, because of neutrality, Israeli government cannot offer help with that. Is that correct? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. You're correct. There was a letter sent to the government of Israel around safety and security, and we have seen a positive response, which is very welcome, and we thank Israel for that. Armored vehicles are coming in. Some will start coming in tomorrow and through the rest of the month. Personal protective equipment is also coming in. Again, some starting tomorrow, and then others will come in later this month. And some communications equipment has also been approved. There are some communications equipment that we're still under discussion around, but I have seen what I would consider a positive response, which I said is very welcome, and we're thankful for that. On the law and order, yes, the UN will not accept escorts from any party to the conflict because of our neutrality, and also because, as I said, we do not want armed escorts for our conflicts. We're here to provide humanitarian aid, humanitarian relief. We don't want anybody injured or, God forbid, killed over aid we're bringing in. And we do want to maintain our neutrality, and community acceptance is our primary means of security in Gaza. If we started using any party to the conflict to move our cargo or protect our cargo, that could affect our acceptance as well as, you mentioned, our neutrality. Thank you.
So, Mr. Anderson, I have a follow-up, which means that Israeli government offered you equipment for safety, but not personnel.
No, that's correct. Yeah. So the equipment we asked for was UN equipment that the UN agency had purchased, and we just needed approval to bring into Gaza. That's in the form of armored vehicles, generally personal protective equipment, as well as some communications equipment like handheld radios and these kind of things. Some things around the internet are still under discussion, but as I said, we welcome the response and are thankful for that.
Thank you, Scott. Maybe we can go to the screen and then come back to the room. Michelle Reuters.
Hi, thanks so much for the briefing, Scott. It's Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Just a couple of quick follow-up questions there. You said that you've obviously received this approval for some of the equipment to come in, and the internet's still under discussion. That's where you want to move it to maybe a satellite-based internet service, as I understand. Is that correct? And then just on the blue, using within Gaza, using the blue police, how realistic is that? Are there still police to be used? And has Israel given any indication on whether they might be open to that? And then just on, you mentioned the truck drivers and how they're understandably a little wary of making deliveries. How much of a problem is that now, a lack of truck drivers to actually move goods? Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, for the question. So, yeah, the remaining discussion on communications equipment is around the internet. In terms of the UN, our requirement is just that we would like stable internet. The solution, we're open to whatever can be brought in. So, the discussions, as I said, are ongoing, and I know there's been a lot of talk between UN headquarters and the government of Israel around that, and we're very hopeful that we're close to a solution. On the police, the current police in Gaza, the blue police, work for the municipalities, much like they would anywhere else in the world where they work for city governments. Some are still here. We do see some occasionally. I think it would be a path to figuring out how to get blue police back out and providing law enforcement, community policing. Those that are associated with the de facto authorities, Israel will not allow to return to work. But there are other people in Gaza that hopefully we can find a way to get them, some sort of training or tie into the community policing that I mentioned earlier, Ida's question, and just try to get some basic law and order so that we can move our goods safely. And the truck drivers, it's not a problem yet. It's just kind of the very beginning of the warning of what could become a problem. I move in an armored vehicle, as do my international colleagues. Truck drivers move in a truck that is not armored, and it can be very vulnerable. So we're, I guess, sounding a little bit the alarm bell that this could potentially be a bigger problem. For now, we're able to continue our work, which is very important, and we're thankful to the drivers for that. But we do want to make sure that as I stay safe, that they also stay safe.
Thank you, Scott. Abdelhamid.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for the interview, for the press conference. My name is Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have a few questions.
Abdelhamid, we lost you.
Yeah, okay. I can't hear him.
Okay. Abdelhamid, if you can fix the problem.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. There are some who try to blame the lawlessness and the chaos in Gaza on the Palestinians themselves. How do you address this question? And second, Ms. Sigrid Kaag has been working for over 6 months. Have you seen any difference? Had things improved since she took office? Is the line from Cyprus to Gaza bringing anything to the Gazans? And my last question, sir, there was a massacre, a really brutal massacre on Saturday. 90 people were killed, over 300 wounded. Another massacre yesterday, Sunday, when 20 people were killed while they praying, and another UNRWA school. The massacres of the Palestinians becoming a ritual, a daily event that attracts no attention. Is that the case? Why the killing of the Palestinians in mass is not making any waves in the international community? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. To start with your last question, I said it in my briefing. It's been said by our Commissioner General many times that the sanctity of UN installations should be respected by all parties to the conflict, that we should do everything we can to keep civilians safe and from harm. And that's why we need a ceasefire and independent investigations into these, which, again, our Commissioner General has called for on a consistent basis. The 2720 mechanism, so everything coming through the pier is coming through from Cyprus, and that's all part of the mechanism. Everything that comes from Jordan is also part of the mechanism, and I know Sigrid is working on bringing Egypt into it as well as the private sector. So we've seen some positive benefits. There's one central clearinghouse for requests to Israel to bring things into Gaza, and that's helped sharpen our advocacy around things that we need. Sigrid's a seasoned politician as well as a humanitarian, so she has a lot of access to senior officials to carry conversations and requests for things too, and we all work very closely together. So we have seen some positive benefits. Hopefully we'll see more positive benefits as we move forward in time. On the lawlessness, I guess all I would say is that every society needs police to function. That's truism around the world. It's no different here in Gaza. So I think that the absence of police is what's causing the challenges, right? As people find themselves in a bit of a vacuum and are looking at different ways to fill that. So what we're very much, as I said, trying to do is figure out ways to bring community policing or bring police back to work. And I'm quite confident if we can do that, that we will address any of the issues that we have And I'd end by saying that the lawlessness that we speak of is not all of Gazans, right? It's a few families that are trying to take advantage of this opportunity. And that's why I'm confident if we get police back at work, that they can address the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Ibtisam.
Thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim, Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper. I have two questions. The first one about the commercial goods, whether you have anything entering Gaza, to which percent, if you could say something to that. And then I want to ask about, there was an operation by the Israelis a few weeks ago or more than a month ago in which they freed, I think, 3 or 4 hostages, and then around maybe 300 Palestinians were killed in that operation. And according to news reports, the Israelis used some aid-like vehicles or trucks, etc. So my question, and maybe the American port, and I think there is some UN investigation in this direction, if you can confirm that. But my question is actually here, in that context, whether you saw that this operation affected your work on the ground with the community and the trust, although of course you don't have anything to do with that, but the fact of maybe using such vehicles that affected your work negatively. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the questions. On the commercial goods, I mean, there are goods that come into Gaza. What the UN is very good at importing is sort of staple foods, right? We bring in flour, we bring in lentils, bring in rice, oil, sugar, salt, these kind of things. What we don't bring in is fresh fruit, fresh vegetables. We don't bring in, things like that, eggs, meat. And this is where the aid community and the commercial community have to work together very closely to ensure that there's a well-rounded food basket available for people in Gaza. So I don't know what the ideal ratio for that is, but it is a role that we want the commercial sector to play. There is a role for them in Gaza, and we do see things coming in. There was some fresh fruit today that we saw here in Khan Yunis, which I take as a very positive sign. On the operation that you spoke about that happened a while back, only 2 things I can say about it, because I wasn't actually here then. I happened to be out of Gaza at that moment. Aid vehicles were not used. The port was not used. And we have not seen any impact on our relationship with the community. I think, as you mentioned, we weren't in any way involved. The only involvement we had that day, the UNRWA Health Center in Nuseirat helped treat over 100 patients that were injured in the operation. So we continue to play the role of responding to whatever's happening on the ground. And I think that our relationship with the community remains quite good, and that there's a lot of trust between them and